It's been almost 5 years since 17 people were murdered by Nikolas Cruz at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. And just recently, a jury spared Cruz's life by not recommending the death penalty as his sentence. And this verdict was obviously very emotional for the victims' families, community members, and people just watching this trial unfold. So why wasn't the death penalty recommended for Cruz? And if death isn't the appropriate sentence for him, when should the death penalty be used? So about that, on this week's episode of So About That, I spoke with a criminal defense attorney who actually assisted in jury selection for the Cruz case. And he says sentencing someone to death is far more complicated than people realize.
There are rare and exceptional cases where maybe this is the only appropriate punishment. But this is, it was a heartbreaking case every way you look at it for everybody who was involved.
For Cruz's case, jurors had to consider if his actions met any of the aggravating factors that are considered when sentencing the death penalty. Some of those factors include if the murders were especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, or if it was committed in a cold, calculated, and premeditated manner. In this situation, the jury agreed that Cruz had met these factors. But this is where things can kind of get complicated, because there can be mitigating circumstances that the jurors have to consider. One of the arguments for the defense was that Cruz's birth mother heavily drank and left him with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. This can cause brain dysfunctions that led Cruz to have erratic and sometimes violent behavior. Having any sort of mental or physical illness doesn't mean Cruz would be automatically spared from death, but it does mean that jurors can decide if these circumstances are enough to override those aggravating factors that we talked about earlier.
It is entirely based upon their own opinion of them. Virtually anything can be a mitigating factor. There is a specific list of the aggravating factors, but virtually anything conceivably could be a mitigating factor. And how much a particular factor weighs on them is personal.
And that means every juror has to agree with the death penalty for it to be recommended as the sentence. But it wasn't always like this. In 2017, Florida adopted a new sentencing law requiring that jurors unanimously find aggravating circumstances and they must all recommend the death penalty. It now only takes one juror to vote in favor of life to spare a defendant. For decades, it only took a simple majority of jurors, or 7 out of 12, to recommend the death penalty. Today, Alabama is the only state that requires a simple majority to impose a death sentence. And under the reforms in Florida, judges would also be prevented from overriding a jury's recommendation of a life sentence. So in this situation, 3 jurors said they could not recommend the death penalty due to those mitigating circumstances. Cruz will be sentenced to life in prison, and there isn't much more a judge can do. Justice looks different for everyone, and no matter how you feel about the sentencing outcome, this case may spur a conversation about the death penalty and if it should be imposed at all. Do you have any questions about the Tampa Bay area, or maybe just why things are the way they are? Well, I want to hear from you, so send over those questions. You can email me at mjones@10tampabay.com, or you can find me on Twitter at KittyJonesTV. Don't forget to like this video, drop a comment below, and hit that subscribe button because we have new episodes dropping every week from this series, our Welcome to Florida series, and Jenna's investigative series, What's Brewin', all here on The Deeper Dive.